I'm joined today by Jason Capehart, the head of data science and machine learning at Mission Lane. We've spoken a couple of times, so it's nice to see you again, Jason. How are you doing?
Nice to see you too. It's a great day.
Perfect. So we've had a few conversations in the past about various things, and there's some more things that I wanted to ask you, specifically about what you're up to in the fintech space. And you've been working with data in the fintech space for most of your career. What was it that attracted you to the industry initially?
Yeah, well, so I got in the industry initially by accident, right? It wasn't intentional. And nobody called it fintech then, nobody called it data science then. But what brought me back to fintech is really, I think, the thing that's interesting, which is, there was a time, 10 years or so ago that I was at the New York Times and looking at what was happening in San Francisco, that people had coined the term fintech, and I saw people working on a lot of the problems that made me frustrated with financial services and were the reasons that I left. Right, I saw people looking at the way that technology companies work, opportunities in machine learning and the application of data, a focus on consumers and the customer experience, and the trajectory of finding ways to think about designing products and services for customers that helped with their lives and their needs and concentrated on long relationships instead of short transactional ones. Those were the sorts of things that really got me excited to come back to fintech and come back to financial services, because I saw this, what I perceived at the time, and I think in hindsight it's been borne out, which is there's this huge opportunity in fintech for having a responsible business and a good business to be the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that's easy to achieve for a lot of people, and it's a fine line, isn't it, for business interests, but also being responsible for your customers.
Yeah, it can be, and that's the sort of thing that I think that the best financial services companies get, right? I think that the players that I admire and the ones who do it the best are ones who really do have their customers' best interests in heart and are thinking about how both parties can be successful over time.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there, Jason. And we have a lot of people out there listening to this that probably, have some ideas of similar to what we're talking about here, and dreams of starting their own thing in the fintech space. And you're one of the founding people at Mission Lane. So what advice would you give to someone looking to start up in the fintech space, whether it's their own organization maybe, or just get into the industry? What would be some good advice from your experience?
Yeah, so I'll say that right, as much as we call it fintech, over time, I think that this customer aspect is one of the defining factors, or potentially the most defining factor about what's different about fintech companies versus legacy financial services institutions, is that the tech is the how more than it is the what. In the sense, the what is the ways in which we use technology in the same way that Google, or I'll say try to use technology in the same way that Google or Apple or Amazon or whoever your favorite successful tech company is, to meet the needs of our customers in a way that is convenient and easy for them. Technology is the way in which we do that. And so when it comes to businesses, and I think that there's been enough history here that you can see fintechs that have been successful and see fintechs that have failed. And I think that finding that product market fit and really starting with focusing on, what does your customer need? What do they actually want to do, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, like, what today I want to do? I want to find a 1/4 point better mortgage interest rate. Nobody does those things. Or like, what I want to do? I want to go and connect all my bank accounts and credit cards to this, financial service. Like, nobody does those things for fun, right? You do those things because there's something that you want in your life. You want to get a better job, or take a vacation, or be set up to buy a house, right? There's something that ultimately a customer is trying to do in their lives, and if you focus on that need that you're trying to meet for them, that's what's going to allow you to design your technology and do all the great things that we can do with data, algorithmically, with automation to meet those needs. That's the thing that's really important. Yes, I have to say, if you're asking for advice, right, I have to say things like don't forget about unit economics again, right? There's enough history here that we can see there have been businesses that have done a nice job of thinking about their customer and the problems they're trying to solve that never really figured out how to make money. And usually that's something that if you don't start out with an idea of, on a unit economic basis, does your product make money? Like, you should, that's an important one. Like, I have to say that, you need to make a sustainable business, but it's going to hang around even if customers love it. Yes, you need to think about the fact that this is a regulated industry. It's different than a lot of other types of businesses. And the way that you should think about that as a data person or technologist should be, how do I use the things that I'm good at to fulfill regulations and meet those requirements, as opposed to trying to circumvent it. But really, it all comes back to the foundation, this kernel, that if you're focusing on your customer, their needs, and the thing that they really want to get done and do, you're probably going to do a good job with it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, it's a problem in two parts, isn't it? Using data to identify what a customer needs, but then also delivering on that is the key, and hopefully the thing that makes you money in the end and makes everything worthwhile and justifies, everything you're doing. I totally agree. And one of the really cool things about fintechs, that I think you were touching on as well, that differentiates them from traditional FinServ, is the accessibility to financial services, essentially, that fintechs are able to provide for people. It's a very important part of the industry. And how does data enable that? How has data become sort of the gatekeeper when we talk about inclusion of people in financial services?
Yeah, so I'll say I think that, right, when we talk about gatekeeper, I'll say what that means to me, at least. Right, the last time I saw the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, put together a study on this, they estimated something like roughly 10% of people in America were what they would call credit invisible, in the sense that they don't show their data, right? They don't have data on file with a credit bureau. And probably another 10% of Americans on top of that, or people living in America, are what they would call unscorable, in the sense that maybe they have some data at a bureau or one of these systems that fintechs use and banks use in order to communicate about customers, but there's not enough data there to really do much of anything with. That's kind of what the unscorable means. And so you add those things together and you're saying, like, well, that's close to 50 million people in the United States. If you added up all of New York City metro area, right, the whole thing, Newark, Jersey City, all of Los Angeles, all of Chicago, right, that's still not enough people, right? If you took all the people in those cities, that accounts for just how much the United States is in this, like, gatekeeper accessibility problem of not having access to the same sort of financial services that you and I might be accustomed to. And so I think that, as much as one of the themes that we talk about in fintech is this idea of people who've been marginalized by legacy institutions, it's important not to confuse marginalized with marginal or minimal, right? This is a lot of people. This is a real problem for many people. And the way that data comes into this is right through this gatekeeping aspect of that. One of the ways in which data brokers and financial services provide value is by being a gatekeeper, by communicating about who you can trust and who knows who and what your reputation is. But right, that value they're creating is also part of the problem, which is, if you're not in this system, if people won't work with you, it's difficult to get a foothold. And so what we've seen, over the course of the last 5 years in particular, is the innovations in open banking in particular, which is one of my favorite areas, and as well as in alternative data, in particular the accessibility of alternative data, and the way that bureaus and other groups have made that more common and more accessible and more understandable. It starts to create a lot of opportunities for people who right, previously had no way to get a foothold or were in essentially a separate kind of financial system from the mainstream financial system, that at least it is easier, at least there are more routes to get in to those sources now than there were a few years ago. But again, it's still the case that this is still more the domain of, I think, innovators in the space. It's still not quite mainstream, and I think until we see more success and until some of these data sources get more use and more traction and more people pick up, wait, why are some of these fintechs being so successful and growing so quickly? It's like, this is why, and other people will eventually get on that bandwagon, and then, you know, my hope is overall that gets better for a lot of those 15 million Americans we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And 50 million is a staggering number when you think about it, you know. And I think you're right with the rise of things like open banking and new types of data that we have access to help people in that situation. Traditional FinServ and other organizations are going to have to catch up. They'll realize what not only are they missing out on, but what other, you know, this group of people throughout the United States need, and hopefully they can meet those needs as well. So we talk about these new types or sets of data that are enabling, you know, helping inclusion and things like that. Two things that stick out are, you know, cash flow data and
Yeah.
other alternative data. How has that affected, you know, the lives of working class Americans?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, there are a few examples that I really like. One of which my favorite, and maybe this is a smaller thing, but it's so cool that I have to mention, which is some of the subscription management things, which are right. It's essentially, I would call it subscriptions can be a regressive tax, in the sense that if you are short on time, as many working class Americans are, and you are not able to spend as much time managing your finances, right, the existence of these subscriptions or things that they don't really want or don't really need become a tax on the virtue of the lack of time. And so I think open banking, and right, which is where we get cash flow data from, is a great example of a service that really benefits people who are short on time and short on income, and for whom cash flow really matters. A lot of the tools around either personal finance or, you know, more towards the upper end of the financial spectrum, but still primarily focus on middle class, would be things like wealth management, right? Open banking again, and cash flow data. These are the sorts of things that, like, that's how you unlock the existence of these tools, and certainly for these tools to be better, easier to use, more direct than they were before. Even things like the entire buy now, pay later industry, there, right, that didn't exist, you know, not all that long ago. Could some of that happen without open banking data and without cash flow data? Yeah, it could. Does it happen to the extent that it has without it? Like, no, almost certainly not. And it's same when I look at some of the opportunities in lending for lending to new immigrants, or, you know, near and dear to my heart are people who have had credit problems in the past, people who've had bankruptcies, people who've had issues with credit, or right, people who are new to credit, and again, facing this gatekeeper problem of like, wait, I want to establish my credit history for the first time, or I want people to work with me for these different products because I want to rent an apartment, or I want to get a job. Like, how do I get into this? Those are the things that I see, and I'm excited about for regular Americans.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to not only the things that are right around the corner, but what the future is going to bring to use data to help people in the, you know, their financial lives. And I think we've established very clearly that data is incredibly important in changing people's lives in the and their financial situations. And there's so many ways that it can affect someone. And I know that you're very busy in the space as well, Jason. So what are some of the, you know, the cool ways that Mission Lane are using data to sort of improve the lives of their customers?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, data is right the heart of our business, and how we operate it and how we think about it. But to me, the thing that matters to me the most and I think is the most impactful for the people that we work with is around access to credit. One of my favorite stories is around a year ago, my wife was on the phone with health insurance, trying to sort out something for my daughter. And the agent that she was talking to said, who's the insurer? Who's the company? Who's the insurer? And I said, Mission Lane. Mission Lane's the insurer for this. And the agent said, I have to stop you. I have to tell you a story. Just give me 1 minute, which is where the agent had a bankruptcy. She had some problems and had to file bankruptcy. And after the bankruptcy, nobody could work with her. And so she was telling my wife that she went and she was trying to get to rebuild her credit and trying to get a credit card, and nobody would approve her until she found Mission Lane. And Mission Lane was the only company that agreed to give her a credit card, and getting that credit card was what allowed her and her husband to rent a car to be able to travel to see their son's graduation for college. And for me, that was the first time that I had a personal experience of running into somebody who was a Mission Lane customer who had really had a major life event impacted by the ability to get access to credit. And so for me, like, that's why we do these things. I spend a lot of time looking at data and thinking about numbers and algorithms and what do those things mean. But the reason I do those things and the reason why I think that is a meaningful and important endeavor are things like this. Most people who wind up in difficult credit situations or difficult financial situations got there out of poor circumstance, poor luck, and they need a second chance and they need to find a way to rebuild. And I think that by looking at the margins and looking for turning over stones, right, that we can do and be objective with data and algorithms, right, those are the sorts of things that can unlock this, that really can make a positive impact in people's lives who aren't being considered and I think treated the way that they could and should be.
What a brilliant story. I imagine your wife was straight on the phone to you after that call.
I did. She said I got some some hugs and kisses from my wife for that one, for doing that. It is something that you whether it's I or people that you talk to or might be listening that want to do a fintech idea or want to help somebody with their financial lives, and ultimately, it takes so much time and so much effort and so many failures to get to the point where you've created something that can have a positive impact on the world. But that's the sort of thing that I look at and say, it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get there, but that's the sort of thing that makes it all worth it.
It's brilliant, and it's such a testament and justification of the work that you're doing for that, to hear that from somebody who's been affected directly by it. And what a small world as well.
Yeah, it feels like to me, we're still a small company, and so I hope to do more of that in the future.
Brilliant. Hopefully some people listening to this as well know somebody or could benefit from getting in touch and having a similar experience. It's fantastic and really encouraging to hear all the positive work that Mission Lane are doing, but also, lots of other people in the fintech space as well. And I wanted to ask you, it's a question that I pose to everybody in the series in one way or another. What do you see for the future of fintech? And how do you think things can get better, and how can we help more people?
Yeah, I'll say, a couple of weeks ago, I was at a fintech conference, and which is not something I do very often. But it was funny because somehow in my mind, even though fintech's been around for a while, it's still like a dozen men and women in startup offices, workspaces in San Francisco who have this crazy idea about no, we're going to change financial services. but I stepped out on the conference floor and looked at everyone there like goodness gracious, like fintech is a thing now. There are a lot of people, a lot of companies, a lot of businesses, and so for me, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around the current like state of fintech as it exists today. But you know, for me, when I think about the future of fintech, I think that we've validated a lot of the approach of fintech, things that we're talking about in terms of the focus on the customer, our technology at the heart of the business. And I think that in the future, we're probably going to only see more of that. That yes, a lot of fintech has focused on groups that have been poorly served by legacy institutions or groups that are marginalized. But I think that we're seeing more and more that this approach and this philosophy to the way in which we do business and we serve our customers is winning out. And so I think that we'll see fintechs become more popular, become more mainstream, do more of the typical financial services that we interact with every day and that are more common. My assumption is that as we come out of whatever this economic downturn is, or whatever the economists will eventually call it, that we'll probably see more consolidation. We'll see more mergers and acquisitions as fintechs that have great features or fintechs that have, you know, good standalone products will come together to be more robust and to serve more customers and make it more seamless for them to get their financial needs met. And have their financial needs continue to be served as they move over time. I think that that's likely what we'll see over the course of the next few years. But I have to add one more thing, which is you know, maybe a little self-interested, but you know, in our world, in the data world, in the data science world, and machine learning, I really have to think that open banking data, consumer permissioned or even consumer owned data is one of the things that we're going to see more and more of. It just makes too much sense for that not to be a future direction for all fintech and consumer lending in particular, where having the ability for consumers to own their data, potentially profit from their own data, and more than anything else, have agency and control over what is shared and what is not shared is the thing that makes sense to me. That it's good for customers, it's good for businesses, it aligns with what I think a lot of regulators and consumer advocate groups would like to see. And that's the sort of thing that I get excited about and think about as we talk about people who you know, are kept out of traditional financial services, that the US may take a page from developing countries and how they've used novel data sources or things like phone data and so on to be able to get people that foothold and get them that first step into financial services. And that, right, you start to tie those things together with what we can do from an algorithmic fairness perspective to make sure that we're treating people equally and fairly, and that we can explain what we're doing from an algorithmic or model-based decision-making standpoint. And that's just a set of things that for our space and data makes so much sense to me, that within the broader picture of fintech and financial services, I think that'll continue to be an area of innovation.
Absolutely. I think you're right on the money with you know, consumers having control and some ownership on their data. And I think the fact that we're even able to talk about you know, people profiting off their own data is such a massive step in the right direction.
It really is, yeah.
Compared to where we've, you know, been over the last sort of 10 years. I think that's you know, talking to you, Jason, has filled me with optimism, I'll be honest. Which is
that's the best compliment I could get.
And hopefully, I think, you know, particularly for the remainder of the year, we're going to see some of these you know, predictions coming to fruition and things to really start looking up. So it's really good to see. Jason, it's been fantastic speaking with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. Really good episode.
Same here. It's great to see you again.